I doubt any of you out there have ever really heard about the show back at the Barnyard. If you have, then you're one of the lucky ones, as the show had a rather unmentioned showing during its lineup. Now, to give a brief explanation of the show for those of you who don't know about it, it's a show that was created in 2009 by writer Steve O'Derrick, the same man who made Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius. The series itself was a spin-off of the original movie Barnyard that was made to detail the day-to-day lives of the animals that lived on the barnyard. The show stars 7 main characters: Otis the bull, Abby the cow, Pig, Freddy the ferret, Peck the rooster, Bessie the cow, Duke the dog, and Pip the mouse. These characters would pretty much go around on random silly adventures, often annoying their next-door neighbor, Mrs. Beatty, or getting tormented by a child by the name of Eugene, aka Snotty Boy. To further explain each character, as well as help you get a better understanding of what I saw, I'll give a small summary of one. Otis, a male black and white bull with udders that enjoys having parties and generally being the downfall of most of the characters on the show. Otis is, quite literally, a carefree bull that tends to exploit and manipulate his friends to try and get them to do his bidding. He's also considered the main leader of the barnyard. Abby. Abby is a female tan and brown cow with dirty blonde hair and a very heavy country accent. She's very talented at sports, carving, as well as anything having to do with country music. She's also Otis's love interest in the show. While she is a rather very kind and considerate animal, she does have her moments where she could be a very violent person if pushed off the edge. Pig is a very fat, pink, tall, lazy character. His personality consists of him literally eating everything that he can get his hooves on. While he is a huge glutton in the series, he's usually a very charming and funny character. He's rather knowledgeable in certain traits of cooking and mechanics, and he also has his own segments in the show where he interrupts the show to do a various viewer mail skits every few episodes. Pip is a small gray mouse who lives in the barnyard with the other animals. He seemed to be very wisecracky, smart alecky kind of person, often to Freddy. He also has a crush on another cow by the name of Bessie. Despite his wisecracking and sarcasm, he's a very energetic mouse who would often prove himself useful if needed. Bessie is what most people would consider a jerk. She's a chocolate brown cow with a cow tag on her left ear. She's very bossy, insensitive, as well as just plain cruel at times. She would often attack the other animals if she is angry for any remote kind of reason. Not only that, but she would also go so far to insult her friends at various occasions, with the sole exception of Abby, that is, at any point in time of the day. Peck is a young rooster who is considered the weakest out of all of the characters. He's a small red rooster with very little feathers. He's shown to be very intelligent, and he has his own class where he teaches other small animals. He's also very accident-prone, and this is evident with him either getting hit by a meteor or just having general misfortune plague him during an episode. He's also the best friend of Freddy the ferret. While it's not been discussed in the show, it is unknown if Peck knows about Freddy's carnivorous background, or even if he knows that his friend wants to actually eat him. Freddy is a large, rounded, orange ferret that lives on the barnyard with the other animals. He's a ferret that seems to suffer from many different psychological problems, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and multiple personality disorders, to name a few. He's also an open vegetarian, possibly bisexual ferret, who is a lovable little oaf. Despite Freddy's mental health issues, he's the most likable/lovable of all the characters on the show. He's kind, forgiving, and a bit of a dunce as well, but in a good way. Freddy also has a best friend in Peck the Rooster and would often try and eat his best friend, albeit rather hesitantly every so often. He's also treated very poorly by the other animals and often discriminated against because of the fact that, well, he's a meat eater. Duke is a black and white sheepdog, similar to a beagle, and is the main pet of the farmer. He's often the straight man who doesn't really want to go on many adventures, or oftentimes gets dragged into it. Despite that, he pretty much is a fun-loving kind of guy, but really stands by the rules. Mrs. Beatty is one of the more major focuses of the show. She's a middle-aged woman with a long blue and pink dress, pink glasses connected with chains, and pink high heels. She's one of the main antagonists of the show, often trying to expose the animals by means of video cameras, phones, and pictures. However, she's often thwarted by Otis in her attempts, and would often make a fool of herself in the process. She has a nephew by the name of Eugene, aka Snotty Boy, and would often babysit him in the show. Now that you've gotten a bit of a gist of the show, as well as the characters, let me tell you about an episode that was supposed to be the original series finale of the show. In 2014, Steve O'Derrick had plans to make a 1-hour-long series finale for the show back at the Barnyard. This episode would be the first episode of Season 3, right after the Season 2 episode Aliens, and would also be the startup of the Season 3 plot as well. Unfortunately, Nickelodeon canceled the show before the episode itself could ever be animated, or cast for that matter. This, of course, was a huge disappointment for Mr. O'Derrick, as he had a relatively new concept for the show, and the episode was going to show it. Steve O'Derrick had the idea to try and make the show a little bit more like the movie, with darker themes, an actual plot to it, controversial topics, and more character development in the show. O'Derrick himself was originally going to bring back a few of the characters from the original movie and the series to act as either the side or main characters. He also spent much time and energy with the writers to get the show the way that he wanted it to be made for the Season 3 premiere. The episode he worked on was called Operation Barnyard. Sadly, it only got us so far of the script before the show was eventually cancelled. Years passed, and the script for the show was ultimately forgotten by Mr. O'Derrick after production of Planet Sheen, and given to a few interns to properly dispose of. This is how I managed to come across the script. No, I wasn't an intern at Nickelodeon, nor did I have any connections to Nickelodeon in general. I'm a 21-year-old man who is currently living in a nice, spacious, 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Los Angeles, California. I work in construction 48 hours a week, and I often have to pass by the main studio to get to my job at the paper mill. With that being said, I had always wanted to snoop around a studio like that. However, I knew that doing something like that would not only put my job in jeopardy, but it would also cost me my clean police record. Now, as I was driving home from work one day, I was stopped by a large garbage truck making its way out of the large parking lot at Nickelodeon Studios. Not only was it doing that, but it was also carrying a large 2-ton dumpster in its claws. Now, I had been a bit too close to the truck, but what happened next really ticked me off. As the garbage truck was lifting the dumpster into the air to dump its contents into the back of the vehicle, one of the claws slipped and the dumpster tipped slightly, covering my car with garbage. "Oh, you've gotta be kidding me!" Those were the words that I yelled out as boxes, papers, and small wrapped trash bags poured into my car like ice cream in a fat kid's mouth. I wasn't really having a particularly great day that day, and this garbage certainly wasn't helping things. After half of the contents buried in my car in a sea of discarded office supplies, the garbage truck man filled in the truck, placed the dumpster back down, and drove off. I was honestly pretty livid after that. Not only did this jerk dump 50 pounds of crap into my car, but he also had the audacity to just drive off like nothing had ever happened. I made a mental note to kick this guy's ass when I got the chance, and opened up my front door. As I expected, there was trash all over the place. However, the few good things that didn't happen that day was that everything was either papers, boxes, or bagged up trash. So at least I didn't have to worry about having a bunch of gunk or nasty stuff all on there, and in return have to sit there and wash my car. Also, at least the dumpster didn't tip all the way over and smash my car down into bits. After calming myself down a bit, I grabbed some of the trash that had been left behind and started tossing it into the open dumpster about 10 feet away from me. Once I had gotten most of the trash out of the way of my windshield, I made my way back to the car and drove home. A few minutes passed, and I was back home to my cozy little apartment, ready to spend my weekend at home on the couch and catching up on some television. After locking the door to my car, I decided to check and see if there were any more bits of garbage that I may have possibly missed. Checking the car, I wound up finding a rather odd surprise on my back windshield. On it, lying comfortably on the small windshield wiper, was a 13x9 professionally labeled box. I picked it up, and sure enough, it wasn't empty. I looked at the box all around to see if there was any markings or writings on it, but there was none. Curious, I took it upstairs with me and brought it inside. I placed the box on my kitchen counter and grabbed a small box cutter from one of my drawers. I then opened it up to find a thick script. A little bit anticlimactic, but it was better than a dead cat. I grabbed at the script and took a look at the front cover. Back at the Barnyard, Season 3, Episode 1, Operation Barnyard. This was certainly an interesting piece. I myself used to watch the show a lot as a kid, so finding this was honestly a blessing to me. I was a bit curious to know how, or why for that matter, somebody would take the time to throw away a perfectly good script. I decided to take some time, 2 weeks to be more specific, to actually read and memorize this piece word for word. However, due to some time constraints and to keep the story short, I'll describe it as if I was actually watching the episode itself on television. The episode began with the usual intro and theme music for the show, but with all the animals all locking themselves in the barn at random pieces of wood and displays with all the animals locking themselves in their barn with random pieces of wood that display the names of the writers, animators, and creator himself, Stephen O. Derrick. After about 2 seconds, the title card showed up. The background of the title card was a darkened laboratory interior with Mrs. Beatty with all in black gear, black cord holding her up, and a few weapons on her back belt, a baseball bat, smoke bombs, and an earwax gun with both tubes lodged in Mrs. Beatty's ears, to be specific. She's also donning a very expensive-looking pair of night vision goggles. The right side of the title card had all the animals huddled together in fear. After a few seconds of the title card, the episode then began. Act 1 began with Otis and the rest of the gang all gathered around the backyard of Mrs. Beatty's home. Otis was sitting atop of the farmer's tractor, ready to crank it up. Supposedly, they were going to prank Mrs. Beatty by waking her from her mid-afternoon nap. Not a really creative prank, but I guess it was alright. Otis then started a countdown from 5, with the others joining in afterwards. Once the countdown had concluded, Otis then cranked up the tractor and hit the horn button, which it had for some reason, hard. The sound of the blaring horn from them had the camera cut to the inside of Mrs. Beatty's bedroom, when she screamed at the sudden loud noise and jumped out of her bed in fright. The camera then cut back to all the animals laughing hysterically at their little joke. Their laughing was then abruptly cut short by Mrs. Beatty literally bursting open the back door with her foot. All of the animals then turned their heads to see a rather horrific sight. Mrs. Beatty stepped closer towards the animals. Her body was covered with a large bathrobe. Her face was covered in a green face mask, and her hair was moving in all different directions like Medusa on speed. And her eyes literally had fire jutting out of them in complete fury. Mrs. Beatty? Why do you look like a scary underwater demon? Otis said in a weirded out tone. Mrs. Beatty said nothing for about 3 seconds before screaming and lunging herself at the animals in a mixture of rage and insanity. Guys, get on the tractor now! Otis said as he and the others hopped on the tractor and drove off. This didn't stop Mrs. Beatty, however, as she jumped a long distance from her yard all the way to the tractor. As she jumped on, she started attacking Otis with her hands and teeth, causing Otis not to be able to look at the road. All the while, the other animals tried desperately to get the psycho woman off of him. While all of this was happening, the scene then cut to all of them leaving the barnyard and heading straight into town. While driving past the onlooking pedestrians, whose mouths were agape at what they were looking at, the tractor finally came to a stop after crashing into a random pickle cart, causing everyone in the tractor to fly off the tractor and into the road. Finally, Mrs. Beatty was taken off of Otis by Abby. Am I okay? Did she eat my face? Otis was saying frantically. Abby then checked Otis out and reassured him that he was fine. Otis then gave a sigh of relief before laughing. However, this was cut short after he saw that everyone was looking at them. Milk me, Otis said fearfully. Mrs. Beatty then calmed herself down, only to see everyone staring at them, including the mayor himself. She smiled widely as the truth had finally came to light. I told you so, she said to everyone before turning to the now terrified animals and whispering the same phrase to them as well. All this time, Otis and the others tried to run away from the crowd of people looking at them, but they were apprehended by animal control, violently shoving them all to the ground and chaining all of them in different ways, before being put in cages and put into the large vehicle. Once the vehicle had driven off, everyone then immediately started profusely apologizing to Mrs. Beatty for calling her insane and everything. Act 2 involved Mrs. Beatty being mentioned on the news by Hilly Burford. Then a montage of at least 10 different scenes showing in 30-second intervals. One scene of Mrs. Beatty on a talk show, another scene involving the animals being locked in separate experimental cells, and then another with Mrs. Beatty getting the key to the city for some odd reason, and another of the animals being given electric shock therapy, and so on and so forth. Act 3 started with the transition of the silhouette of Otis dancing across the screen. Then it showed Mrs. Beatty sitting on a rocking chair outside of her house. She's seen drinking lemonade and relaxing on her porch. Apparently, she had been animal-free for the past week and a half. She even commented on how nice it was of a day, and that it was finally nice to finally get some peace and quiet for herself. This, of course, led Beatty to her thoughts. At first, they were peaceful, but then it started showing clips of all the animals being tortured in one way or another. This continued to happen for a good portion of the scene before Beatty finally snapped out of her daydream. After taking a deep breath, she then heard faint crying in the background. She immediately got up and went to go and see who it was that was doing that, only to discover the farmer sitting there on his porch. Mrs. Beatty then asked him what the matter was, and the farmer then proceeded to go on a huge tirade about how she had ruined his life and how she had taken away his animals, which were basically his family, from him, and that his entire farm was going to be completely and utterly shut down because of this, and not just that, but he was also being investigated for having a, quote, talking animal menace as well. This caused Mrs. Beatty to feel instantaneous guilt at what she had done. And, after a little bit of thought, she took a deep breath and then proceeded to tell the farmer that she'll do everything that she can to try and get them back. The scene that transitioned to all the animal silhouettes running across the screen, and then showed the animal control laboratory. Mrs. Beatty then was shown. She was dressed in all black, while action music played in the background. She then went inside of there and began sneaking around the entire laboratory, and slowly but surely began to try and look for every single one of the animals there, attempting not to be caught by any of the scientists and the like in the process. But she did wind up finding them, and then she proceeded to free each and every one of them, not even answering any of their questions that they had said. And then, before that, she took a sticky bomb out and began blowing the place to Kingdom Come. She then immediately brought the animals back to the barnyard, and then proceeded to apologize heavily for what she had done to them. The episode then concluded with a group hug. Now, I do apologize if this episode seemed rather dumb or not that exciting. I had to condense the actual episode down a few notches before I could tell you about my experience. However, I still do have the script, and if I ever have time, I might just share it with the world. And that, my little shadows, was Back at the Barnyard, Season 3, Episode 1, Operation Barnyard, which is probably what I'm going to wind up calling this story. A Back at the Barnyard, lost episode, creepypasta. My final thoughts on the story? Alright, I know I have a bit of a policy when it comes to sitting there and not, how do I put it? Not reviewing the works that I do. But given how early and everything this one was, I kind of felt that it was a bit necessary. Especially given the fact that it was quite literally one of the first pastas that I've actually written. Okay, maybe not so much the first one that I've ever done, but definitely one of the start. Basically, one of the first lost episode pastas that I've actually done in my life. The other one, the actual first creepypasta I really genuinely wrote was Are You As Hungry As I Am? Now, this is my issue with my own story. Granted, I had just gotten back into writing again, and I'm looking at this story, and I have to admit, the character mentioning and everything was okay. I'm gonna be honest. It was alright. Although some parts of it were completely and utterly odd and rather unnecessary, like for example the mentioning of like some parts and everything with Freddy and everything, just weren't really. If anything, the summaries of the actual characters themselves really should have been done a lot better in retrospect. And another thing too is that the grammar in this is not that good. I mean, I know I harp on a lot of you guys, but now it's time for me to harp on my own story. Yay! No, the story, the grammar in this, while there is an attempt, it's still not that good, and it's actually relatively difficult to kind of read at times. And there were also parts of the story that really just, honestly, just didn't really do much of anything for me. I mean, parts of it, just didn't really have anything new to really incorporate into this. I mean, it's somewhat new, perhaps, but still. If anything, the descriptions and everything could have been a little bit shortened down a bit. I mean, that's really just me, though, although I'm the one that wrote the story, but still. Now, continuing on with the pasta itself, there's another really big inconsistency that is a really bad thing with this pasta, a really big negative, and that if this is supposedly, and I repeat, if this is supposedly going to be the series finale, why is it considered Season 3, Episode 1? What in the world was I thinking when I wrote that? I mean, did I not understand the concept of what a series finale and a season finale could have honestly been? I mean, at the very least, this could have at least been, like the startup of Season 3, perhaps. No, but apparently this is, apparently, series finale. I mean, come on, past me. You couldn't have at least sat there and, did like a little bit of research, perhaps, sitting there and actually looking up what it is. I mean, it's not that freaking difficult, past me. I mean, what is wrong with you? You should know that. It should be season finale. Or better yet, it's not even a season finale. The season finale for Season 2 was Aliens. You could have said the startup of Season 3, or the very beginning of it, maybe. But no. You decided against that, didn't you? Very, very, very unfortunate in more ways than I can think. Also, for anybody wondering why the mic quality is different, my microphone decided to die on me, so I'm having to use my iPhone, thank goodness, to do the rest of this recording, and I should be able to finish up whatever other pastas and everything that need to be done today. Anyway, even with that, said and everything, all those problems, all those issues, yada 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 yada, there is the biggest issue here, and that's the ending of the story. The ending is awful. I don't like the ending. I think the ending, more or less, is just downright god-awful in ways that I don't even think I'd even know. Main reason being why I despise the ending so much is that it went from a description of an actual episode all the way down to, I don't know, all the way just a regular cruddy summary. That's basically all that it is. I mean, I'm not kidding. And it's really, really, really difficult to sit there and read, too, because it's like, then it showed the Animal Control Laboratory. Okay, care to sit there and give a little bit of a better description, perhaps? Maybe? No? You don't? You're gonna be too lazy past me to do that? Okay, then. And then it was like, she was dressed in all... Okay, like, where in the world did Mrs. Beatty come from? See, people, this is the biggest problem with the story, is that around the ending, it just kind of just... I guess past me was just extremely lazy and didn't know what in the world they wanted to do, because there's this garbage. I mean, come on. There could have been so much more incorporated with the ending. And just having that cruddy, I apologize if it seems dumb or not that exciting, condensing No, you didn't have to condense any of the episode. You could have easily just sat there and, I don't know, worked through it maybe. Actually provide something more, perhaps. Maybe something, to actually explain something. That ending was awful. Overall, though, this is simply my own personal opinion. And if you disagree with it, that's perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions in regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of the story would have to be a 4 out of 10. It was relatively an okay lost episode, but it failed in the ending horribly, and the descriptions and everything really need to be greatly improved. But what did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you guys enjoy it? Did you guys not? And also, what would you have personally done to help make the story a lot better? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. I'm the Shadow Reader. Thanks again for watching today's episode, and if you're brand new here to this channel, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. And of course, like always, roll the outro because I'm out.
Your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horror-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at